Hello world. So recently I gave my first non-technical talk on how I learned and applied data science before and after AI in quotation marks. And so I thought it would be interesting to have an elaboration of that in both English and Mandarin. And that's how this series of videos is coming about. So let's get to it. And if there's one thing you should remember at the end of this video, it'll be this, that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, or 千里之行始于足下. Because I think the heart of what makes modern AI training so effective is a generally applicable lesson to how we learn and do things and just get through life in general. And essentially, I'm going to be using a lot of terms interchangeably here and making a lot of gross simplifications. Using November 2022 when ChatGPT got released as that pivotal moment for before and after AI, just for the sake of convenience. Also because it aligns very nicely with my personal timeline. Yeah, so what happened was essentially in April 2022, like everyone else, I was kind of like stuck in Singapore for family reasons as well. So I finally found the time to sit down and learn coding proper for the first time in my life, actually, as a non-technical economics major. Initially, learning data science was definitely slow and painful because even something like this, just 14 lines to print some sort of a tic-tac-toe board would take me an hour to write. Yeah, and you also feel like a fool sometimes because you see documentation like this as a complete beginner talking about the use of softmax functions to predict probabilities, and like this looks like English but it reads like Greek. You have no idea what it's talking about. Eventually, over time, if you keep at it though, what I come to realize is actually that I think in a way, all of AI in fact can be grossly simplified as just a mapping from any input X to any output Y hat, right? So all that we are doing is essentially using a backward propagating algorithm, much like how if you are trying to move down a mountain, you would always take your next step in the direction that is a bit lower to where you are at, and you just keep going at it. And that simple principle, together with a lot of other ingredients, would prove to be what makes modern LLM so especially effective. And I come to a point in around July 2022 when we are finally getting around to the interesting bits, which is deep learning, which is really the broader umbrella within which modern LLMs are kind of like built upon, right? And essentially, whatever large language model we are looking at, Gemini, Claude, or GPT, it's almost an insult to your intelligence that they're all kind of like variations and elaborations upon these 6 lines of code. I mean, of course, with a lot more sophisticated engineering and other innovations in the attention mechanism and whatnot. But essentially, this is kind of like it. Deep learning is also essentially surprisingly simple. And just using that simple backward propagating algorithm combined with a lot of other critical ingredients, we're able to get so far. Right, so as a developer, you also get early access to a lot of cool new toys. Like around July this time, I actually also had early developer access to GPT-3. So this was like before the public release. And all that I did with it was to ask it to write a rap about a certain political ruler. And that was it. And then throughout August to October, I'm kind of like working on my graduation project about artwork annotation. And I think often the times as someone new to the field, you will be at a loss as to how many layers should I use, how many neurons at each layer, and so on and so forth. So a lot of architectural design decisions. And I think again, in retrospect, what we realize with modern LLMs is that we can actually constrain and remove the human from the equation, right? Just by using this simple algorithm to always be minimizing the gap between your prediction and your loss, apply over an entire internet's worth of data, as well as combine with this other innovations around the attention mechanism, around this whole idea that certain things are more important for predictions than others, and also giving your models an awareness of positions, and so on and so forth. Essentially, that simplicity of just letting the model learn as much as possible by removing as many barriers to learning as possible, right? For it to just learn to predict by looking essentially at the entire distribution of data on the internet. That will get us to where we are today. That will get us to the November 2022 moment when ChatGPT got released and took the world by storm. And what I took away from the entire incident is really that suddenly I also was able to learn from how other people are using AI, and to realize that in fact there are as many use cases as there are users, rather than that one use case of writing a rap. Right, so come February 2023, when I feel like my coding is a bit rusty, I was able to start to use AI to generate code. So if you look at learning and doing data science before and after AI, the feedback loops are just so much more quicker, because you just generate the prompt, look at what's returned to you, and then paste it into the environment, see if it works. If it doesn't, paste in the error and then try it again. Instead of having to Google and read through dozens of documents to try to absorb all the context, we can actually get going and test things very quickly once you understand some of the basic principles around how these things work. So I was able to benefit from other people's sharing, and I think something that I took away from this whole episode is really that innovation requires openness, right? Because if you want to innovate, ideally you want to have dozens of experiments, millions of experiments all running in parallel, and then just learn from them all at once. That would just reduce the search space so much more quicker. So because I'm using AI as my co-pilot, pair programmer, sometimes even therapist, I was able to ship an interactive bilingual storyteller delivered over WhatsApp even before Meta incorporated AI into WhatsApp themselves. So this was in April 2024, and there were a lot of new things that I was doing on this project, but again, it wouldn't have been possible if I didn't have access to AI as my pair programmer, which then allowed me to immediately leverage what it has already learned from the internet. So what I find myself to be doing most of the time is actually almost like a manager supervising an intern, basically breaking a complex mission into various tasks, and then further decomposing that into more discrete steps, and making sure that I'm providing the relevant context, the most updated documentation and information, so that the intern can do his or her job effectively. So I think that one of the most interesting questions we can ask ourselves in this age of AI is therefore, if everyone has access to our own tireless army of researchers, writers, editors, and programmers, and so on, right? What could we be building instead to maximize our impact, if not happiness? I think for me, at least, the tentative answer is in the democratization of knowledge, as well as the creation of new knowledge with AI, which is why I released Reggaeton in my GitHub repository in June 2024. It's essentially a package that does automated content writing end-to-end. From all you have to do is seed it with a few keywords to initiate the topic. Then it's going to search the internet, your notes and relevant sources for you, get back what is relevant, and then use that to create the entire article after breaking it down into like headlines, content structures, as well as detailed paragraphs. And because it's all digital, we can actually easily build on top of that to rewrite in a jargon-free manner, to translate into languages we desire. And I think essentially where I would like to go with it is to potentially rewrite the Chinese web. And obviously I'm not going to have the money or the time to hire people to do so, but I can do things one step at a time and then see what happens. And I also think that AI has a super important role to play in the production of knowledge as well, which is why this current research that I'm working on, as you can see on the screen, from a recent training run, has to do with how we can use AI to automate the extraction of Chinese characters from ancient documents. As it turns out, it's actually a very tricky problem, And we are looking at, as you can see on the top corner, the top half of this screenshot over here, we're looking at inscriptions from thousands of years ago, from the Oracle Bones period all the way to contemporary writing, right? So, and what I've done is essentially train a convolutional neural network model with a simple attention mechanism just to get started. And what you see in the darker areas to the right of these characters are actually areas where the model is paying more attention to for making its predictions. So just with after a few hours of training on 300,000 over examples on my MacBook, I was able to achieve close to 80% accuracy. They were actually kind of like overfitting, but I think the power that we could unleash with AI over here is we can actually look at what is within these documents for the first time and hopefully unlock new insights and new knowledge. Because who's going to have the time to sit around and write out what is in these ancient oracle bones or books and all that? But with AI, we can actually speed up and potentially automate that whole process. And essentially, this is all done just with this 33 lines of code. That's pretty much all it takes to define that model for the training. And this kind of like how my workspace looks like these days, right? There is the area where I code, and then I'm also chatting with AI for new examples and to understand the latest research to be able to reproduce them and borrow the best methods. And it's a very rapidly iterative process of learning, and potentially we can then go on to implement more sophisticated learning schedules as well. Because I guess the issue is if you're too aggressive with your training, it's kind of like just as in gym training, you may end up spraining your muscles as well. So there are a lot of things that we can do with AI. And in summary, I think the one meta lesson I'm taking away in thinking about hill climbing and how it applies to life in general is really that if we do things one step at a time, right, and always make sure that we're headed in the right direction. So if you have this rapid feedback loops that allows you to measure how far you are from your goal constantly, eventually you will come down the mountain. Yeah. And that's the end of my presentation.